Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ghost Protocol. Farden here. If you like our video, please leave a like and comment. Subscribe to stay connected with us, and we will continue to publish videos. Welcome back, everyone. I am Farden, and I hope you are all doing well. I am moving on to a new story now, and I will read it out exactly as it has been written. Assalamu alaikum, Farden Bhai, and dear listeners. I am Muhammad Sifat Alam. How are you all? I hope that by the infinite grace of Allah the Almighty, you are all doing very well and are in good health. The story I am about to share with you today is no ordinary supernatural event. This is the story of an individual's ongoing real-life struggle. The person who shared this account with me wished to remain anonymous. They reside in the DOHS area of Dhaka Cantonment. They informed me that there is no resolution to this situation as of yet. If anyone assumes that everything will eventually work out for the best, they are mistaken. So let us delve into the events of the story. I will attempt to lay out the entire sequence of events using a timeline to make it easier for you to follow. The story begins in 2022. In 2022, I met a young woman through a mutual friend. Initially, we were just friends. We met, talked, and hung out every day. Before we knew it, that friendship had blossomed into love. A deep mutual affection had grown between us. When our families began to notice this, my mother sat me down for a talk. She said, "Look, son, this kind of relationship, this culture, doesn't exist in our family. If you really like the girl, then marry her. Don't waste time unnecessarily." Mother's words seemed very logical to me. After all, I really do like the girl. I could certainly get married. You wouldn't believe it. It took her barely 2 seconds to say yes. It seemed as though she had been waiting for this very proposal. She was overjoyed and told me to ask my mother to send a formal proposal to her family that very day. Things moved very quickly after that. My mother spoke to hers, and the two families took an immediate liking to each other. My future mother-in-law was so delighted when she met me that she invited us over for lunch the very next day. My mother, my younger sister, and I went to their house. From their side, her mother, her elder brother, and she herself were present. It was just an informal meeting. The plan was for us to simply get to know each other for the time being and to inform our fathers gradually later on. Everything was unfolding so quickly and beautifully. It is hard to put into words. Today I realize that just as easily as it all began, it ended just as easily, much like the eerie calm that prevails right before a fierce Kalbishaki storm strikes. When a storm strikes, its raging fury makes it impossible to grasp what is actually unfolding. It is only after the storm subsides and one surveys the wreckage that the true extent of the devastation becomes clear. I am standing amidst the ruins of my own life right now. Our love was pure and genuine. The wedding date was finalized, and everyone was overjoyed. My family, her family, my sister, and my mother, everyone sang her praises. My mother used to ask, "Where did you find such a wonderful, virtuous girl, my son?" My mother-in-law regarded me as the answered prayer of her tahajjud, her late-night supplications. Everything went smoothly. The wedding took place. We decided to hold the ceremony for bringing the new bride home 2 months later. It was a mutual decision. I can unhesitatingly say that the 2 months between the wedding and bringing her home were the most beautiful period of my married life. I had absolutely no inkling of the terrible ordeal that awaited us next. The first incident, I wouldn't call it the start of the main event, but it was certainly a warning sign, a word of caution. I had a pair of lovebirds in my room, two creatures I was incredibly fond of. They would chirp all day long, filling the entire room with a wonderful sense of joy. They stayed inside their cage, right there in my room. It was the morning of my wedding. The house was teeming with guests and everyone was frantically busy. I was so swamped with tasks that I couldn't even find a moment to step into my room. I always kept my room door locked and the windows shut, ensuring no one from outside could possibly get in. I unlocked the door and stepped into the room. My heart sank, or rather felt like it was being crushed. I froze as I looked at the cage. A lovebird lay dead on the floor of the cage. It wasn't just dead. Its neck was completely snapped. I stood rooted to the spot, my throat parched. This bird had been chirping until yesterday. I had even heard it this morning. It hadn't died a natural death. Someone had broken its neck. But who? There was no chance of a cat or any other animal getting in, and the cage itself was intact. That really upset me. But with guests at home and the wedding approaching, I didn't have the time to dwell on it or grieve. The incident certainly came as a huge shock, yet I managed to pull myself together. The surviving bird died just 2 or 3 days later. The wedding took place. Everything went smoothly. We had decided that once I brought her home, we would move into a separate house. That is why I told her, I won't accept even a single matchstick as dowry from your family. He had a condition. Since I wasn't taking anything else, he would have to set up a separate household for us. I agreed. It didn't matter. The two of us would build a little nest of our own, our dream home. What could be more beautiful than that? We rented a place. It was quite a mess. Wearing masks and brooms in hand, the two of us cleaned the entire house together. Even now, the memory of that time brings tears to my eyes. The chemistry between the two of us was, in a word, unparalleled. People used to cite our pairing as an ideal example. 2 months flew by, and we'd moved into our new home. An incident occurred the first time we visited my parents' house after bringing her home. She had a particular hobby. We had a beautiful photograph from our wedding, and she had turned it into a large painting to give to me as a gift. The painting was so exquisite that my mother practically insisted on taking it from us. Mother said, "It's beautiful. I'll keep it in my drawing room." I didn't object. Many relatives had come over and the atmosphere was cheerful. The new bride was visiting the house for the first time and we had a wonderful time. We returned home that night. But as soon as we stepped inside, a fierce argument suddenly broke out between us for no apparent reason. I still can't recall exactly what started it, but the quarrel escalated to such an extreme level that you wouldn't believe it. Within just half an hour, we decided to get a divorce. It was extraordinary, completely bizarre. We had both lost all control. Our faces were flushed red with rage. Furious, I went and sat in another room. Just then, my mother called. As soon as she got through, she burst into uncontrollable sobbing. She kept asking the same thing over and over. "Are you two okay? You haven't run into any trouble, have you?" I was stunned. I couldn't very well tell her the truth. It felt like our marriage was on the verge of collapse. I said, "Mom, we're fine. What happened? Why are you crying?" Sobbing, Mom said, "Son, just 5 or 10 minutes after you two left the house, that painting hanging in the drawing room, it It suddenly crashed down from the wall onto the floor and shattered into pieces. A jolt like an electric shock ran through my entire body. What was Mom saying? I tried to rationalize it to myself. Maybe a gust of wind had blown, or perhaps it had been knocked hard. But something deep inside kept telling me that this wasn't normal. Mother took the incident very seriously. After all, mothers possess a sixth sense. They can sense when something bad is about to happen. Some time passed after that. We were settled in our new home. Then, one night I noticed something. I usually stay up a bit late. She had already fallen asleep. The room was dark and everything was silent. My wife was snoring. People tend to snore when they are exhausted. I was still awake. At first I used to tease her about it, telling her she snored so loudly. She would get angry and insist that she never snored at all. I used to think it happened because she was exhausted from work. But one day the lights were on in the room. He was asleep while I lay awake. Suddenly I heard that snoring sound again. I moved closer to him, trying to listen intently, and my blood ran cold. The sound wasn't coming from him. It was coming from that dark corner of the room. My heart pounded, and it felt as though my feet had been nailed to the floor. I couldn't move. I realized there was something unnatural in this house. I hadn't told him anything about it yet. I remained silent, fearing she would get scared. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. These incidents began to escalate. We were sitting in the room watching a movie when, suddenly, the dishes on the dining table crashed violently onto the floor. I rushed over only to find everything perfectly fine. Another time, I woke up in the morning to find the gas stove fully turned on, even though the windows were closed. Had I struck a match, the entire house would have gone up in flames. Countless such minor incidents kept occurring. The frequency of our arguments began to escalate exponentially. Things would reach a point where we would hurl terrible insults at each other. Yet once the dust settled and we calmed down, neither of us could even recall what the fight had been about. I couldn't make sense of it all. Amidst this, she conceived. We were both overjoyed at the news. During the first 2 or 3 months of the pregnancy, the bickering between us subsided completely. She would try to go along with what I said, and I in turn took care of her. But the atmosphere inside the house remained unchanged. I kept feeling that staying there wouldn't be right. A new life was on the way. While God would certainly protect us, I also had a responsibility as a father. I suggested to her that we spend some time at her parents' house and some at mine. She agreed. We accepted the pain of leaving behind the home we had lovingly built together. We spent some time at my mother's place, and then some at hers. Throughout that pregnancy, I felt as though some invisible force was desperately trying to harm or destroy us. So many complications arose. A few months later, during a checkup, the doctor suddenly said the baby's heartbeat couldn't be detected. It felt as if someone had struck my head with a hammer. The entire world seemed to come to a standstill. After a great deal of running around and consulting various doctors, Allah showed His mercy. Then, physical complications set in. Suddenly, her condition would deteriorate so drastically that even the doctors were baffled, only for everything to return to normal the very next day. Trouble arose again during the final 2 months. The baby's growth suddenly stalled. From the beginning, the doctors had maintained that both mother and baby were perfectly healthy, yet this sudden crisis emerged. We went for a routine checkup one day, and upon reviewing the reports, The doctor stated that the delivery had to be performed immediately. The baby's heartbeat was not registering properly, and the infant would need to be moved to the NICU right after birth. And they told us to be mentally prepared. I was terrified, beside myself with worry. I kept praying to Allah, pleading with Him to protect my wife and child. Finally, the delivery took place. It was a beautiful baby girl. The doctors came out and said the baby was perfectly healthy. No need to take her anywhere else. Alhamdulillah. I breathed a sigh of relief, but the doctor said something strange. The baby was healthy, but I shouldn't talk too much about it to anyone, as she might attract the evil eye. I didn't give it much thought after that. Both mother and daughter are healthy. That is the greatest blessing for me. But the real game had only just begun. After the baby was born, that invisible force seemed to shift its focus away from the child and fix itself entirely upon me. Perhaps because I kept challenging it. It never confronted me directly, yet it set everything in motion to sever my roots. One day I was sitting at my office, working. Suddenly I felt a sensation, much like a sharp knife inside a balloon trying to burst out, as if something sharp were attempting to tear its way out from within my head. Everything before my eyes seemed to lay bare, and I felt as though a weight of several tons had been placed upon my shoulders. I tried to speak, but no sound escaped my lips. I couldn't bring myself to call my colleagues. I was terrified the first time it happened. After that, I never quite felt like myself again. A massive change came over me following that incident. My ability to regulate my emotions plummeted to zero. I lost all control over myself. Previously, whenever we argued, I used to stay quiet or apologize, but now, even if he fell silent, I couldn't do the same. Something deep inside would goad me on. I felt as though I simply couldn't back down. The relationship has to end right now. Everything needs to be completely shattered. I underwent an MRI and had all the brain tests done. Everything was normal. The doctors couldn't find a thing. It was just that this pain inside my head started occurring 4 or 5 times a day. I was driving when it suddenly started, and I had to attend office meetings. My condition deteriorated to such an extent that the HR department summoned me one day. They said, "Look, given these sudden panic attacks, if an accident were to occur at the office while you are in this state, the company wouldn't take responsibility. You really ought to take some leave and undergo treatment, otherwise we'll be forced to..." You can imagine my world turned upside down. I was already grappling with so many problems, and on top of that, I was facing the threat of losing my job. Amidst all this, we even had to move house. I thought moving to a new house and a new environment would bring a welcome change. For the first month after moving in, I told myself that, come what may, I wouldn't dwell on anything paranormal. If a light broke, I'd call an electrician. If a tap malfunctioned, I'd call a plumber. But the real chaos began after that first month. I'd fix a light in one room, only for a fan to break down in another. There were short circuits in the kitchen. Then, suddenly, came the sound of a massive explosion. I was sitting in my room, working at the time. The entire house shook. I jumped up in fright and ran to the drawing room to check. The doorbell unit had been completely charred. The next day, I brought in an electrician. After inspecting the entire wiring, he said, "Sir, everything is fine. There were no voltage fluctuations either. I can't explain why the doorbell ended up like this." I was utterly exhausted. I couldn't take it anymore. On top of that, a new ailment took hold of my body. If I caught even the faintest whiff of water, just the scent, I would immediately feel an urgent need to rush to the washroom. The smell of water made me feel as though my insides were melting away. Drinking water is a basic human need, yet it seemed my bladder couldn't retain it. I visited the city's most renowned urologist and spent a considerable amount of money. He suggested it might be a UTI or an infection and prescribed heaps of antibiotics. I took the medication, but it had no effect on my body. I decided to switch doctors. Finally, I consulted a very senior professor who told me that the test reports showed no abnormalities and that he couldn't figure out what was wrong. I realized that medical science could do nothing more in this situation. Meanwhile, my wife's condition was deteriorating. She used to have a job and performed very well, but after exactly 3 months, the company would lay her off, citing some bizarre reason or another. This happened to her not just once or twice, but 4 times in a row. Our financial situation hit rock bottom. We had planned to run the household together, but now the entire burden is on me, and all while I'm in this physical state. My weight began to increase abnormally. If you were to compare photos of me from before and during that time, you wouldn't believe it was the same person. I looked at least 20 to 25 years older than my actual age. I was completely shattered emotionally. Unable to bear it any longer, I finally opened up to my mother about everything. She was alarmed by what she heard and arranged for me to speak with a religious scholar, a Qari, whom she knew. I told Qari Saheb everything. He said, "Tomorrow morning play the recitation of Ruqya on the speakers at your home. See what happens, then let me know," I said. "All right." The next morning I was getting ready for work while she was making breakfast in the kitchen. I casually connected my phone to the speaker and played the audio of Ruqya, recitations of verses from the Holy Quran. Within just a few seconds of the verses playing, I felt as though someone had used a syringe to suck out every ounce of my inner strength in a single pull, from the nail of my big toe right up to the hair on my head. I collapsed heavily onto the bed. If I hadn't been right next to the bed, I collapsed onto the floor, clawing at the ground. My limbs became completely paralyzed. I couldn't move even an inch. I was gripped by sheer terror. I felt as though, for as long as that recitation continued, I would never be able to stand up again, that I had been crippled forever. I screamed out to him with all my might, "Stop it! Stop it!" He rushed over and turned off the speaker. Shortly after the speaker was switched off, my body gradually calmed down, and my strength began to return. It was such a harrowing experience that I didn't even dare to call Qari Saheb again. My mother later told me that he had warned beforehand that such a reaction might occur initially. At the start of 2024, she left with our daughter for her father's house, while I stayed at my father's. We weren't speaking to each other at all. We lived apart for about 2.5 to 3 months. During that time, I managed to persuade her to return a few times, but she would leave again. I missed my daughter terribly. She is the apple of my eye. I couldn't sleep at night. Do you know what the strangest part was? Despite all the fighting and problems, we still loved each other. We had made a plan. We hadn't gone on a honeymoon after the wedding, so we decided to take a trip now. We thought a visit to the mountains might do us good, that everything would work out. All the planning was done. Our flight was just 2 days away. But exactly 2 days prior, that explosion happened again. An irrational, senseless argument. To this day, I can't recall how it even started. At one point during the fight, She completely lost control. She started running towards me, using whatever toys of our daughters were within reach. To protect myself, I pushed her away. She immediately left the house and went to her father. Our families then insisted that we have absolutely no contact with each other. I thought that, just like before, everything would eventually go back to normal. That once her anger subsided, she would speak to me or I would speak to her. But the next evening I received a call from her father. He made his stance very clear. Arrangements were being made for our divorce. I was stunned. What was this all about? Divorce? I knew there were many issues between us, but I had never even imagined that the relationship would come to a complete end. I tried to reason with him. My father spoke to his father, but to no avail. Later, I learned that he, too, had wanted to speak with me. However, whenever we tried to talk on the phone, circumstances would always get in the way. We would get so furious over nothing that within 2 minutes, we would be hurling insults at each other and hanging up the phone. Eventually, we got divorced. My entire world fell apart. My carefully built home, my wife, and my child, everything was reduced to ruins right before my eyes. After the divorce, I couldn't bear to stay in that city anymore. Every street and every corner reminded me of her. I changed jobs and moved to a different city, hoping that a change of scenery might change my luck. Perhaps I would find relief from this invisible curse. But no, I was wrong. It has been nearly 2 years since the divorce. I hear that he still misses me terribly and suffers from severe depression. But what is the point? I am now in a state where I have no control over my own body. There are days when I cannot even get out of bed. I try to take a step, but cannot maintain my balance. I fall. My vision remains blurred all day long. And the most terrifying thing is that the same incidents from before are recurring in my new apartment as well. There are no hotels or residential areas in the vicinity of this building. It is a very quiet place. Yet every night at a specific time, the entire room falls into pin-drop silence. Suddenly, there is the sound of a very loud clap right in the middle of the room. And exactly 2 seconds after that clap, the sound of 8 to 10 people whispering begins inside my room. I cannot understand the language they speak or what they are saying, but I can clearly hear 8 to 10 people standing in my room and talking amongst themselves. This goes on until the Fajr call to prayer. And when I do fall asleep, the dreams I have rob me of my rest. I see myself sitting on the floor, dressed in clean clothes. All around me, large chunks of raw meat were stacked in rows, much like the flesh of sacrificial animals, and my hands were stained with blood. I could not fathom what this signified. I had given up all hope regarding the doctors, knowing they could offer me no help. A few days ago, I lay bedridden for 4 or 5 days straight, lacking even the strength to make it to the toilet. I would simply lie there in a state of detachment, waiting for nightfall, waiting for that sound of tapping, and the moment the whispering would begin. One night, unable to bear it any longer, I called my mother. She burst into tears upon hearing everything. "Son, just keep the phone on while you sleep." I lay there with my eyes closed and the phone on speaker. The next afternoon, my mother called me. Her voice was trembling. "Son, you should leave that house." "Why, Mom? What happened?" "Last night, after you had fallen asleep, I clearly heard, through the speaker, many people talking together inside your room." A chill ran down my spine. It meant I wasn't hallucinating, nor was I the only one hearing it. Those things were actually present in your room. Dad heard those sounds on the speaker too. He would call out to me every 5 minutes asking, "Son, are you okay?" And I would reply, "Yes, Mom, I'm fine." From then on, Mom would wake Dad up almost every night. My father wanted to forcibly take me away from that house. But a strange thing happened. A kind of inertia took hold of me, and I absolutely refused to leave. I would simply say, "Mom, I'm fine. There's no problem." That is my current situation. Through this platform, I would like to make a request to everyone. Please keep me in your prayers. I want to feel a little better. I am grappling with a deep sense of despair. When there was still time to set things right, they didn't let it happen. I have been separated from my wife and my daughter. I have suffered such immense loss today that I wonder what reason there is left for me to go on living. Dear listeners, that concludes today's story. As I mentioned earlier, there is no end to this saga. We do not know what fate holds in store for him. That is how Sifat Alam concludes his story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do let me know if you did. Thank you all so much for watching the story to the end. We will meet again with a new story. Until then, take care of yourselves and your families. Goodbye.